Hello, fantasy sports fans, and welcome to MFSN's weekly live question and answer fantasy sports show. I will be your host today. My name is Casey Scheinvold, also known as Vlad to the Bone. We are in the swing of the fantasy baseball season, which makes me very excited because fantasy baseball to me is the most enjoyable and best fantasy sport available. It's the longest season. It involves 162 games, or the longest portion of 162 games. So it allows us to spend a lot more time focused on the fantasy sports. It is a daily games in across the league as opposed to football, which only has weekly leagues. So I just think fantasy baseball is far and away the most enjoyable fantasy sport there is. I do enjoy watching it in real life. I enjoy fantasy baseball even more. So my first question, what is the favorite trade that I ever made? I've been playing fantasy baseball in some form since 1990. I was 14 years old the first time I played fantasy baseball. And my favorite player on my team at that time was Kirby Puckett. So I don't know if I have a favorite trade going back that far, although I did try desperately to trade for Derek Jeter when he was in his third year as a Yankees fan. I couldn't pull that one off. My favorite trade recently, I just made a trade that I like so far. I traded for Chris Bryant. Chris Bryant is the third baseman, as you know, for the Chicago Cubs. He's having a resurgent year. I needed some help in the power department. And at third base, I had Alec Boehm, the rookie. Well, he's a second-year player now for the Philadelphia Phillies. Not doing so great this year, off to a sluggish start, but we're in a keeper league, so he still had value because of his age. So I was able to use him along with Freddie Peralta, Ryan Presley, the closer, and Bobby Witt Jr., the stud prospect for the Kansas City Royals, to get Chris Bryant on my team, as well as Devin Williams, the reliever from the Milwaukee Brewers. So that was a pretty good trade for me. Who are the worst types of managers? Oh, Dan, Dan and I have been playing fantasy sports together for, has it been 14 or 15 years now, I think. And so we have been in leagues together with some really great managers and some really challenging managers. We had one who everybody knows, his name was Shawanameter, who was just a really not nice guy who was into trash talking, but trash talking at a personal level, not just trash talking about your team, but actually throwing personal insults. That's probably, for me, that's the worst type of manager. Somebody who is just not even, it didn't feel like he was focused on the baseball. I get frustrated because I tend to be a very active manager. I like to make a lot of moves. I like to make a lot of trades. I get frustrated with managers who are inactive, who don't respond to trade offers or communications, or are slow to reject or approve trades if you offer them. But to me, gosh, after Shawanameter, probably my least favorite manager is the one who gives up. The one who maybe by the end of June realizes they don't have the strongest team and they're not going to compete. And so they just stop trying. That to me is the worst, because it affects the overall competitive balance of the league. If you're competing with somebody if it's a head-to-head league, your opponents might play them, your rivals might play them the latter half of the season, and it's a free win for them. And so that can affect the competitive balance. And in a rotisserie league, they're no longer compiling any stats. So you're allowing the people below them to catch up. And so to me, my least favorite manager by far is the one who becomes not just inactive with trades and communication, but also just stops managing their team. I think if you make a commitment to the fantasy sport, if you make a commitment to a league, you make that commitment to complete the league regardless, and compete at your best level regardless of your chance at winning. So that would probably be my least favorite manager. One of my favorite things about baseball and how it's different than basketball and different than football, particularly because those are the big three, is I am enamored with prospects. I love the idea of the stud prospect coming up and making a difference in the middle of the season for your team. And those other two sports, basketball and football, that's not possible. That doesn't happen. What you get are people who are already on the roster. It's not like a stud from college is going to come up midway through because he realized the Big Ten wasn't challenging for him anymore. So I'm just going to go be a running back or a wide receiver in the NFL. You have to wait for rookies every year. They can't come up in the middle of the season. My team name is Vlad to the Bone because I've owned Vladimir Guerrero for the better part of 3 years and maybe more since he was in the minors. And so I've been dying for him to come up. Like you look at going back as far as, Chris Bryant. We talked about Chris Bryant. He was a stud who came up 3 weeks into the season and made a difference. This year, you saw Jared Kelenic come up last week, and he's already had an impact with home runs and multi-hit games. Everybody in the world knows about Wander Franco. And when will he come up? They say it could be in the next few weeks at shortstop to make a difference for the Tampa Bay Rays. I love that aspect of baseball because even if you don't have the strongest roster, if you're in a keeper league and you don't have the strongest keepers, you can build your team slowly over time. I didn't have the greatest team. And so at the time, my keepers weren't strong. So keeping Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and now he's finally exploding, means I got an elite keeper without having to pay elite value for a keeper. So baseball is just, to me, is the most enjoyable. I think part of it is I grew up loving baseball. My dream job since I was a kid was to be a general manager for an MLB franchise. As you can see by the poster behind me, I've been a Yankees fan my whole life. So Brian Cashman might have my dream job, but he's doing pretty well. So I don't think it's going to open for me. So I had to start doing something else. And so fantasy sports allows me to feel like I'm invested in the game and more than just as a fan watching it on TV. Baseball, I mean, right now the basketball season fantasy-wise is wrapped up. Obviously, the regular season has ended in the real NBA, and the playoffs are about to begin. They're starting this year with play-in games. That's going to be wild. They're trying to give it a bit of a March Madness feel. I think if they pull it off, it'll be great for the NBA. I am not a huge fan of watching the NBA during the regular season. I'm a college basketball guy. Go Terps. But the NBA playoffs are incredibly exciting. The same is true with the NHL playoffs. I don't know if there's a more exciting playoff format or playoff game than the NHL playoffs. I love the MLB, but just watching the playoffs is like watching any other regular baseball game to me. So the NHL playoffs bring a level of intensity that just makes it so fast-paced and wonderful to watch. What is it like to be a Yankee fan in fantasy sports? Oh, I don't own any Yankees. That should probably answer your question. I am not a huge fan. I think every once in a while you get some great players on the Yankees. Certainly they have plenty of sluggers and great players on their team. But it's tough to be a true fan of a real baseball team and manage multiple fantasy baseball teams because I have 3 different teams. So it feels like every night. And I think this would be true for any fantasy baseball manager who has a favorite team in the real world. Every night I might have 2 or 3 different players going against the Yankees. And so I love watching the Yankees play. I want them to win the World Series every year. But there are certainly some nights where I wish they would lose or strike out a lot. Now, fortunately for me, the Yankees do strike out a lot. You look up and down that roster, and there's a lot of sluggers who, when they make contact, can hit the ball a long way, but and go on extended hot streaks. But in general, they strike out a lot. So pitchers against the Yankees have been pretty successful in that respect. I think, Giancarlo Stanton just went on the DL. That certainly is bad for Ross. If you ever watch our show, Ross the Boss has Giancarlo Stanton, and he was tearing the cover off the ball. Aaron Judge is hot now. So he certainly has finally increased his value. Nobody's value has plummeted more in the last 3 years than Gary Sanchez. He went from being a top, probably 2 or 3, maybe even the number 1 fantasy catcher 3 years ago to questioning whether he deserves to play because he can't bat over the Mendoza line. DJ LeMahieu is like a machine, a hitting machine, but even I haven't looked at his numbers recently, but he wasn't hitting nearly as well. Gleyber Torres has fallen off the map. They just got Luke Voit back, so hopefully he can deliver for them. He certainly won the home run crown last year in the shortened league, so we know he's got the potential to be a difference maker. What's the most important factor in winning in fantasy sports? Oh, I mean, there's a lot of important factors. Obviously, understanding the sport and understanding the strategies behind how to play fantasy sports. But I think it's just attention to detail and being willing to do the research and pay attention on a daily basis. That's what makes fantasy baseball so challenging. Is it's a long season. It's already a month in, and we still have 4 months left of almost daily games. And if you're in a daily league, it means setting your lineup every day. But on top of that, it's understanding the statistics, understanding how to read whether somebody's on a hot streak, or read whether somebody's getting lucky, or read whether somebody's finally broken out. For every, like this year, it seems like Byron Buxton is a breakout player after what feels like 6 or 7 years of tantalizing skill. Now he's hurt right now, but the numbers suspect or the numbers project that he's finally doing it the right way. His exit velocity and barrel rates are up. He's swinging more so at pitches inside the zone as opposed to his chase rate being down. The same is true with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. For 2 or 3 years, it was a launch angle question, and he always hit the ball hard, but he hit it on the ground. Is that going to be his MO going forward? Kind of the way Eric Hosmer was 5 or 6 years ago, with crazy talent, but never could get the ball elevated. Well, this year he's the number 9th ranked player in fantasy at this point of the year. So, and Guerrero's numbers are solid across the board. So that is certainly an important factor. Hey, Ross, what's happening? I'm glad you could join us. What should I do with Juan Soto? He's off to a slow start, but it's early in the season, and the kid has already shown that he can hit. I don't think his value has tanked nearly as much as some people might think. He started the year injured when he got injured early in the year. His numbers haven't been great, but I expect him to produce. He's never going to steal bases for you, so he's never going to be a 5 category kind of superstar, but a 4 category superstar. He's still, to me, a top 10 player to own right now going forward from this point forward. Obviously, the month of April was bad. So I would either hold him or try to, if I was trading him, you better get a whole heck of a lot in return. And if you're in a keeper or dynasty league, he's still untouchable in my book. He's in that Ronald Acuna Jr., Mookie Betts mold of these young players. I think, the highlights this year of players, obviously Shohei Ohtani has been incredible as a hitter. I think he might be the number 1 ranked batter in fantasy, which is amazing. Mike Trout is clearly the best offensive player, in my opinion, on the planet, but Shohei Ohtani might be the best baseball player on the planet, considering that he also has a 98-mile-an-hour fastball and a devastating splitter when he pitches. To me, that cat is crazy. If Yahoo ever combined him into one player where you could play him pitching and offense without having to own him in 2 separate spots, I think he would easily be the number 1 player in fantasy. Trade Trout. He is out for a while. Okay. If you want to, maybe that's who you could trade Juan Soto for. But I don't know how long he is out. Did it say how long he's out? Let me look. A right calf strain. That doesn't sound too significant, Ross. I think he's going to be back pretty quick. I could be wrong. But if he's out less than 3 months, I wouldn't get rid of him, or 2 months. What are people who don't do keeper leagues missing out on? The off season. To me, I mean, they miss out on a lot of stuff. Like owning the same player. You can have players you love. I mean, I am a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. fan, as you can see. And I named my team after him. I've owned him since the minors. And you get to like watch these players grow and you feel a sense of kind of almost pride in owning them or owning them for a long period of time. So that to me is really exciting. The off season in keeper leagues or dynasty leagues is almost as active and sometimes more active than the regular season. You can make trades for keepers. You can watch people switch teams and watch it change their value of your roster or change the alignment of who's a keeper and who's not a keeper. You end up, to me, it even changes the relationships you have with the other managers in the league because you develop these trade relationships over time that are different than if it's a redraft league because the discussion, like I'm a big fan of Ozzie Albies. I owned him when he was a rookie and his second year. And then I shipped him off in a big trade to get Christian Yelich. Still a great trade for me. Going back to the earlier question, I probably should have named that one. I traded Rhys Hoskins, Luis Severino, Ozzie Albies, and who else was it? There was one more really good player for Christian Yelich after his first year in Milwaukee. And that was just a slam dunk trade for me. But since then, I've been trying to get Albies back just because I really believe in him. And it's the same owner year in and year out because it's a keeper league. So it allows me to kind of almost have a playful and fun kind of yearly communication with him about what it's going to take for me to get Ozzie Albies. And so those are some things that keeper leagues allow that the redraft leagues don't. There are advantages to redraft leagues. If you have a terrible roster, guess what? Next year's a new season. If I have a terrible roster in a dynasty or keeper league, it might take me a few years to change that or to correct that. And it might adjust the way I draft in a keeper league if I'm trying to change my roster long-term. For example, I might take the Wander Franco or the Bobby Witt Jr., CJ Abrams, Mackenzie Gore early in the draft because I'm hoping they develop into a keeper to give me a stronger core. Ohtani leads the league in home runs. Is that for real? It certainly seems like it. You know what? I read a crazy stat too. In addition to that, this guy just might be the greatest athlete in baseball right now, is that his speed around the bases was the fastest or second fastest in the league so far in terms of going from home to third on a triple. Faster than Billy Hamilton, faster than Trey Turner, faster than these burners. And that's just amazing. 29.5 feet per second or something like it was a crazy number. Somebody would have to look that up. But I think Ohtani is the real deal. I don't know why he's not playing in the field. I think that's a part of the reason you see Albert Pujols gone, as much of a crime as it was to treat Albert Pujols that way near the end of his career. The guy's a first ballot legend. But they needed that. I mean, you need Ohtani to protect Mike Trout in that lineup. Ohtani, Trout, and Anthony Rendon as your 2-3-4 or 3-4-5 is pretty scary. Then you throw in Jared Walsh, who a lot of us at MFSN included said like his numbers last year were pretty good. This guy's a sneaky good first baseman. I don't know if we expected like top 20 in the league good right now or wherever he's batting, but I know Dr. Daniel Ratner at Joe Boo's Rum is enjoying him on his roster right now. Do I think the White Sox are for real? I do. I mean, I think the AL Central is weak right now. I think the Twins have gotten off to a really bad start. Buxton's hurt. That rookie Kirilloff was tearing the cover off the ball. Then he got hurt. Their pitching has been a disappointment. Their bullpen is a bit of a mess. I think they were the biggest challenge to the White Sox in the AL Central. I think losing Roberts and Eloy Jimenez was a huge loss for them because that was two middle of the order big bats that they were expecting. They expect to get, I guess, Robert back sometime after the All-Star break, but Jimenez, I think he might be out for the season or until the fall. But they have so much offense on that team with they have Jose Abreu, obviously. They have that Yermin Mercedes guy who's hitting like Ty Cobb, I feel like, when he's swinging the bat as well as he is. They have Tim Anderson, who, you know, I have to be the first to raise my hand and say, I thought he was a fluke when he won the batting title a few years ago. When he did it the second year, I'm like, oh, they'll figure him out. I'm starting to think the cat's just a really, really good baseball player and deserves to be listed as an elite shortstop. Their rotation is good. Giolito's not even pitching well, but Dylan Cease, Michael Kopech, you got Dallas Keuchel, the beard. So they have everything to be real in the AL Central. I don't know how they'll do in the playoffs, but if Giolito starts pitching like the Giolito of last year, and you compare that with those other guys, that's not a bad playoff rotation. So I would go with yes for that. Would you trade Tatisse for Soto? No, I wouldn't. And I don't think anybody would. I believe they're two of the best. They might be the two best young players in baseball, arguably, and certainly offensively. I think Tatisse gives you the element of speed that Soto doesn't do. He might hit for a lower average than Soto over the course of their career, but the difference between 325 and 305 in a fantasy league is not that huge of a difference when you factor in 20 to 25 stolen bases a year over the life of their careers in a keeper league or in a redraft league. So no, I wouldn't trade. I would trade his father. I would trade Fernando Tatis Sr. for Soto. I think that would be a fair trade, but no, I wouldn't trade Fernando Tatis Jr. for, wow, who actually, that's a better question. Who would you trade Fernando Tatis Jr. for? In a redraft league, Jacob deGrom, when deGrom is healthy again. I think that level of an ace is plenty powerful and I think has more value. Gosh, I don't know if there's another player maybe Ronald Acuna Jr., but they're very similar. So I don't know if that would happen. Yeah, I can't really think of anything. I think if Vladimir Guerrero Jr. keeps hitting the way he's hitting, because first base isn't nearly as deep as shortstop or outfield, that might be worthwhile. But short of that, I don't think I would trade Tatis for anybody. I got this guy in my league. Let's call him Dr. Sam. He really wants Wander Franco, but he's offering waiver wire players. What do I think? I think that Wander Franco is the next great prospect and arguably a can't miss. Obviously, waiver wire won't get him. I don't know. We had this discussion the other day. Who would you trade on a major league roster for him right now? Or what's the most you would trade for him? And he could get a really good young shortstop back or a good young outfielder back. I don't think he could get Tatis Jr. back. I don't think he could necessarily get maybe Trey Turner back, although Trey Turner might be close. But I think Trey Turner is one of the more underrated shortstops in the game. But somebody like maybe a Corey Seager or a Xander Bogaerts who's tearing the cover off the ball, those might be guys, especially in a keeper league or a dynasty league. Well, not in a dynasty league. That wouldn't be enough in a dynasty league. But in a keeper league, it might be somebody like that who could get him. But offering waiver wire players isn't going to get it done. Are there any Indians you would want on your fantasy team? Bieber doesn't count. Yeah, I mean, obviously, Jose Ramirez is an all-star third baseman who's tearing the cover off the ball. I actually listed him as one of the ones I was worried about in the preseason because I didn't know what would happen with the lineup around him. But I think as of right now, he's batting .260, which isn't good for him. It can only go up. But he's got 11 home runs, 4 stolen bases, 26 runs scored, 23 RBIs. So he's contributing across the board. He's the 27th ranked player in Yahoo for fantasy, for rotisserie fantasy right now. So he would be somebody I would own. Other Indians, I don't know. I don't necessarily think so. I like Emmanuel Clase and Karinchak. I think they're both excellent relievers who give you great strikeouts. I think if the Indians aren't in it, Karinchak, or they become really good trade targets that could end up going to a good team who might need a closer, and they could handle that really well, so their value could increase. Am I missing anybody? No, I think those would be the ones I would most likely look at. You know what? Eddie Rosario, I think, is a good 3 or 4 outfielder that you could own. He doesn't do anything flashy, but he's going to bat 260 to 275. He's going to hit you 25 or more home runs. He's going to drive in some runs. He's going to score some runs. So that would be the only other one I would consider. Giants are in first in the West. Do you feel they'll keep it up? If they keep pitching the way they're pitching, I mean, when you look at what Kevin Gausman's doing and Tony Disco, Anthony DeScalfini, they've been pitching great. Buster Posey seems to have found the thing that worries me about the Giants and maintaining it is I think they're an older team that's prone to breaking down. You know, Evan Longoria has never been a durable player over the last 7-8 years. Buster Posey has battled injuries in the last few years. Brandon Belt historically has battled injuries. Yastrzemski seems to be the real deal. You know, I like him. I think he's doing really well. Mauricio Dubon has been struggling. He's not really doing what everybody thought he should. So I think they can still make the wild card. They've started off hot enough, and if they play decent ball from here on out, but I don't think they're going to finish ahead of the Dodgers or the Padres in the West. Is Hunter Dozier Ross's favorite player and Dan's favorite player? Hunter Dozier is not the best player in fantasy. He's, according to Dan, not even rosterable. According to Ross, he's a good streaker. So if he streaks, you can play him. Tim Anderson. Should I get Red Sox on my team? It depends which ones, obviously. The Red Sox are tearing the cover off the ball. I think everybody expected them to be better this year than they were last year. I think they expected some improvement, but the numbers that Bogarts and Martinez and Devers and everybody on that team, even Dahlback has started to hit now. He started off slow, but he's starting to finally connect the ball. They have some prospects who are like Jarren Duran and Jeter Downs, these good young players who could be up and help them. I certainly would. They're scoring a lot of runs. So if you can get one of the big name players, that do it. You know, I don't know what Christian Vazquez was doing, but he's an underrated catcher in my book. So that would be somebody I would consider too. Did I see JD Martinez being good this year, or this good this year? Look, other than last year, he's been pretty good every year since he got to Detroit. He went from Detroit to Arizona. He started in Houston, was terrible. Houston let him go. He went to Detroit. I think he watched Miguel Cabrera hit for a couple months and said, hey, I want to do that, and learned from him. Carried it over to Arizona and then to Boston. He's been a Yankee killer. Speaking of who's difficult to watch as a Yankee fan. I think we got worried last year thinking that it was maybe age or something catching up to him. He might just be a film room guy. And that was one of the things he said in the offseason, was not being able to look at film in between at bats really hurt him. And he is just insane right now. And he's always had a simple, compact swing that's super strong. He doesn't have a lot of movement. So that always portends to a longer kind of career of success. So I think we saw some regression, positive regression. I don't know if we saw it to the extent it is. I offered Carlos Correa. Ross laughed at me. I'm assuming that's Carlos Correa for Wander Franco. In all fairness, Dan, I would laugh at that too right now, because Carlos Correa is terrible. He's just not putting up good fantasy numbers. And so I don't think anybody would have traded. Well, that's not true. I shouldn't say anybody. I don't think any smart fantasy manager, certainly in a keeper league, would have traded Wander Franco for Carlos Correa. Maybe Corey Seager, like I said, maybe Trey Turner, Xander Bogaerts, but not Carlos Correa. I think if you had offered Francisco Lindor for him, you might have had a better chance. But even then, the way Lindor's been hitting, I'm not sure if I would trade Franco for him. Golden State Warriors or the Lakers? Ooh, James Ward, welcome to the show. I like that question. That's tough because Steph Curry has been out of his mind for the last couple of weeks. I think he just locked up the scoring title a couple years ago. And so it's two veteran savvy teams who know how to win. You know, there's still a part of me that thinks LeBron James was healthy for about 2 or 3 weeks before he came back. and that he was just resting to make the playoffs easier for him. And I can't bet against LeBron and AD in the playoffs, but I'm going to enjoy watching that. That's for certain. Steph Curry is my favorite player to watch in the NBA. I don't watch it that much, but his creativity, he's a little guy, they're not all of us are 6'8", 6'9", and built like a truck. More of us are 6 foot and below and a little less defined muscular. So Steph Curry makes us feel like we have a lot of hope to be an elite athlete. So I will always root for him. But I do think it's going to be the Lakers, as much as I'm not a huge Lakers fan. Joey Votto, Hall of Fame. Joey Votto, Hall of Fame. Wow, that's tough because it's hard to if you look at the Joey Votto of the last 3 years, he's been an average player at best. But Joey Votto in his first 8 to 10 years in the league was like almost like Tony Gwynn with power. It felt like every time he was up to bat, you couldn't strike him out. He was going to get on base, either hit, home run, or walk. And in my opinion, for much of that time, he was the best first baseman in baseball. And so I don't think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think he's a slam dunk the way Pujols might be, because it didn't help that he played at the same time as Pujols and Miguel Cabrera. Like he was there during a time when first baseman had elite first baseman. But I think he probably gets in after a few years on the ballot. Oh, Dan is defending Carlos Correa. He's been almost as good as Seager. I agree. Almost as good as Seager. But if you look at the numbers last year, he was pretty awful then too, and Seager was better. Then Seager went on to win the World Series MVP and played his tail off. And I worry, they're both, look, I don't own either of them. I like Seager better than Correa just because I like his left-handed bat. And I think he's going to hit for more average. If Correa is not running, and I don't know if he's running this year, if he's not running, I don't think he's nearly as valuable as he used to be. He has back issues that he's battled. He seems to get hurt a lot. And so I'm not a Correa guy. So that's all there is. LeBron is going to love beating Curry. Oh, Daniel, somebody's hit Daniel's Cleveland fan button, and he can never root against LeBron because LeBron brought the Cavaliers a championship, and Dan will forever be indebted to him for that. I think that it will be a tremendous game to watch when LeBron and Curry go head to head. I don't think they'll guard each other very much because, LeBron's not going to guard him on defense because Curry runs around too much, and they don't want to tire LeBron out chasing him, and Curry couldn't handle LeBron's size. So they're not going to cover each other very much. So I don't think LeBron's going to beat Curry. I think the Lakers are going to beat the Golden State Warriors. I agree with you, James, where you said playoff LeBron is a lot to handle. He absolutely is. And Dan is the perfect one to ask about that. I mean, he brought like one of the worst finals teams in Cleveland to a championship. And that was all him. Dodgers are falling apart. Will they repeat? Are the repeat as World Series champions? Wow, that's a tough question. I believe they will get it figured out. I don't think they're falling apart. I think they're injured right now. They're dealing with some real injuries. I think once they get Bellinger back, that really lengthens and stabilizes their lineup. He hasn't been great in the playoffs, but he's been awesome in the regular season. I think Mookie Betts is as reliable as it gets. If Justin Turner stays healthy, he's one of those hitting machines. You got Corey Seager. You got Chris Taylor, who might be the most underrated offensive player to me on that team. Will Smith is a good young catcher. Their rotation is stacked. If Kershaw stays healthy, you got Kershaw, you got Buehler, you got Bauer, and then you got Julio Urias. And that 1 through 4, I think, is better than most people's top 2. The back of the bullpen could be an issue. Kenley Jansen, is he reliable again? Is he not? Blake Trinan has been pitching really well. So I think they have the best chance in the NL to get back to the World Series. Um, I don't know who I would pick in the AL right now. I think they crushed the Yankees, but the Yankees are one of those teams that's always constructed as if it's built to win the regular season. It's never built well for the playoffs. And I believe that they went away from that philosophy in the late 90s, early 2000s, where they would intentionally recruit, sign players who fit a certain spot in the lineup, and they would grind the heck out of their at-bats. They were so much better when they had the Scott Brocious at third base instead of trying to find an all-star third baseman, and they had Paul O'Neill, and they had, Bernie Williams, Derek Jeter, these grinded out sorts of at-bats. There wasn't a lot of swing and miss. Now they're built with teams that strike out too much, and let's be honest, you have most of the best teams you play have these aces who can strike out even grinders, so they stink in the playoffs. LeBron never beat Curry. That's not true. The Lakers beat the Cavaliers beat the Golden State Warriors, didn't they? So I think LeBron won. And he did it with Clay there too. Golden State is going down. James told me someone cut Blake Snell in his league. Tell everyone why this is a bad idea. Well, as somebody who owned Blake Snell for a long time, and even back when he won the Cy Young, Blake Snell has elite stuff. His strikeout rate is incredible. His whip can get a little high at time to time, but he plays in a National League stadium, so he's not facing the DH every time he pitches. His stadium is good for pitchers. He's got three really good pitches that can dominate a lineup. If he was dropped, I would be willing to wager that almost every owner in our league would empty their budget, their waiver wire budget, to try to add the guy. He's shown you what he can do. Tampa, I think, hurt his development by never letting him pitch deep into games. I think San Diego is giving him a chance to do that more, and he's still learning how to do that. I think by the time the summer comes around, you're going to see him throwing a lot of quality starts where he goes 6 or 7 innings for 2 runs, strikes out 7 to 10 batters with a few walks and a few hits. He's one of the top 15 pitchers in the league, in my opinion, value-wise. Big names, highly rostered players will randomly hit my wire. There you go. Should newbies be quick to scoop those guys up? Oh, that's what I would. Blake Snell, I would absolutely scoop up, as I said. So we've dealt with that one. What do you think of Jazz Chisholm? Sam Jacobowitz, he's back. Hey, Sam, welcome. I like Jazz Chisholm. That was an interesting trade when the Diamondbacks traded him for Zach Gallen, because Gallen was the better known prospect at the time. And everybody thought it was weird that the Marlins would give up such a good young pitcher for a shortstop. Derek Jeter was the one, I think, who made that trade. So I trust Derek Jeter that he knows shortstop. And as you've noticed from the Marlins pitching this year, they have a lot of pitching. So that was a place of depth. I think that's why they made that trade. Jazz Chisholm's a power speed guy. I didn't think he would develop this fast. I didn't think he would hit for average. I'm not sure what his average is now, but he certainly seems to have that excitement factor. And he's one of those guys that's fun to watch and probably fun to own. So I'm a Jazz Chisholm fan in that respect. It is great to have you back. You have been gone for a long time. All right. Let's see. Can you name 3 players on the Pirates? Yes, I can. Gregory Polanco, Mitch Keller, Ke'Bryan Hayes, is Brian Reynolds, I believe, is on the Pirates as well. Let's see, who else? I'm sure there's more. I'm blanking on them right now. I can name a lot of former Pirates who were traded and became studs elsewhere. So there's at least 4. So I passed your test, Ross. Thank you. Can you name 3 Pirates in history? Oh, come on. Yes, everybody can, but not everybody. Most people can. But one of the greatest Pirates in history, or at least in my history, meaning in my lifetime, is not currently in the Hall of Fame, and that's a shame, and that's Dave Parker. He belongs in the Hall of Fame. Anybody who has ever seen anything that he was able to do in the 80s and late 70s with a baseball would agree. Never forget the closer, Richard Rodriguez. You are right, Dan. He is always fantasy relevant. Sam Jacobowitz wants to know about Noah Syndergaard. He is supposed to be coming back this year. I believe, Dan, is that one of the ones you own in fantasy on one of your injury stashes? I'm not a huge Syndergaard fan. I think his stuff is electric. He throws really hard, but I've never been impressed with his numbers. I don't know if it was a mechanical issue or coaching issues or a head case with him. I'm not sure, but I feel like every time I've turned around and looked, he gets a lot of strikeouts because he throws 101 miles an hour and has a wicked slider. But there's always walks. There's always home runs given up. You have Sale and Carrasco. I'm sorry. So I'm not a huge Syndergaard guy. Of the waiver wire, of the injury stashes for starting pitchers, I would probably have Chris Sale above him. I may have Severino above him, but I mean, if you can get him for free and stash him on your injured list spot, I certainly would do it if I had the space for him. But I'm not a huge Syndergaard guy. He might need a change of scenery. He reminds me a little bit too much a Wild Thing from the early days of Major League. Noah. Oh, he's already in rehab at Single A. Thank you, Ross. So, no, I don't like Thor. I like Thor from the Avengers. I think he's pretty cool, but I'm not a Syndergaard guy. Sale won't have one win this year. Only if he doesn't come back, because remember, he's coming back to a team that can put up like 14 runs a game. So he only has to throw 5 innings, like 6 earned runs, and he'll get a win one of his starts. So I wouldn't say that he isn't going to get a win. You might be able to argue he might not have a quality start this year, but Sale's track record is pretty strong, except for the last couple of years. My rotation is stacked this year. Well, who's in your rotation then, Sam? But if it's anywhere near like what your NBA roster was, which was like 8 top 10 picks, you remind me of that. What was it? Is it Geico commercial where they're like the easiest decision of decisions when it's Charles Barkley against a bunch of 7-year-olds in pickup basketball? That's what I envision when I see your fantasy league, because I just imagine you just dominate the same way Charles Barkley would a group of 3rd graders. So let's see. Any other questions? Not right now. I was going through this and trying to look at like who the biggest surprises are. And I was like, one of the questions I asked myself is, who do I think is the most underrated player in fantasy baseball? I think over the last 4 years, if I had to pick, it would be probably Whit Merrifield. He plays in Kansas City. There's nothing flashy about his game. I know he's always preseason ranked in the top 50, but I feel like, he's not going to win you any one category. Right? He might win you batting average because he always seems to bat above 300. He could score a bunch of runs, but he's not going to win the runs. But he always does all 5 categories at a way that makes him super valuable. And so that is who I would think. Okay, let's see. Bieber, Scherzer, Castillo, Max Fried, Zach Wheeler, Max Fried again. Wow, you have him twice. Sonny Gray, Syndergaard, Sale, Corbin. Well, I would tell you that if you're talking about the Castillo who pitches for the Cincinnati Reds, that I almost think he's droppable at this point. So I wouldn't admit to owning him. I think he's absolutely terrible. Max Fried left yesterday's start, I think, with an injury. I'm not sure what it was. It might've just been tightness. But yeah, that's pretty stacked. Bieber, Scherzer, Fried. That's pretty good. Buxton I think he meant Buxton, not Buxton, but thanks, Ross. Byron Buxton is, it's interesting because for the first 4 years he was in the majors, he was overrated. Everybody was waiting for him to do that awesome thing, and he never did. So he was hurt all the time or whatever it was. So I think he went to underrated this year because people finally gave up on him. He was that classic post-hype sleeper. I think the most underrated this year is Isaiah Connor-Falefa from Texas. Not because his numbers are extraordinary, although they are. He has 5 home runs and 8 stolen bases, is batting .290 and scored 28 runs. But he qualifies at catcher and he never plays there. And that is such value in and of itself that that to me, he might be the fantasy MVP this year if he keeps playing the way he is. Sam is mad at me about what we said about Luis Castillo. Okay. And you might be right that he's going to be great over the rest of the season and give him time. But I don't have the patience for him. And there's a lot of other pitchers that are performing so much better that even if Castillo has mild name recognition and some power that comes with that, I would trade him. Let's see what else. Bobby Witt Jr. Is he ever going to play this year? I think yes, I do think he'll get up to the majors at some point. I'm not sure, though, if he's going to be a shortstop. If they've waited this long for Adalberto Mondesi to play, even though he's been hurt all year and hasn't played, one of my greatest frustrations as an owner, I don't think that he's going to come up as a shortstop. I think they would have done that already. I have a feeling they're going to try to move him to an outfield spot just to get his bat in the lineup because his bat is crazy and he's a wicked good athlete. But I don't know. He's not going to be one of the ones who's called up like Kelenic or Franco or Gilbert in Seattle also, who got called up super early. I think if he gets called up, it's because the Royals are in the race sometime in the second half of the season. Right now, I think they've lost like 12 of 13 games or something ridiculous like that. So they've fallen way behind in the Central. And if they're not a playoff team, I don't see them rushing Bobby Witt Jr. to the majors. They're not a big enough market. Jesse Winker is way underrated. You're absolutely right. This year, particularly, I've owned him in the past. They've compared him to a young Joey Votto because of his on-base percentage, but he was a very, very poor man's Joey Votto for the last few years before this year. But this year he's been tearing the cover off the ball. So that is absolutely true, that if somebody's not aware of what they have in Jesse Winker yet, okay. So I would trade for him. Well, I think, guys, we made it through all 45 minutes, and that was a lot of fun. So I really appreciate all the questions. I love talking baseball with you guys. As always, if you enjoyed this, please subscribe, click the link, ring the bell, click the link for notifications. I loved your comments. Any more comments we'll try to respond to off the air. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I will see everybody soon.
As a reward for making Gilcliff the undisputed clean energy drink of America and beyond, we've packed in more B vitamins, electrolytes, and killer taste than ever. And as a bonus, we've made the ultimate loyalty program. It's not a Coke, it's not a club, it's the Gilcliff Coke Club. Tap into special offers like flash sales and exclusive merch, deep discounts, and eternal awesomeness. Go to Gilcliff.com